This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. What I think is fascinating about the conversations that we're going to have about Deshaun Watson and if he's living up to expectations is how much those expectations are going to feel like they go, up and down during the year. And the reason I say this is, or a better example, that's a better way to put it, a better example of what I mean by this is, let's say Deshaun had, instead of the game that he had against Pittsburgh, let's say the Browns won that game and he had 200 yards, a fumble, and 1 touchdown on 60% completion. He looked all right. Instead of looking awful, he looked all right. Still a little frustrating. He hasn't had the big game yet, but it was enough to win. He didn't make all those big mistakes, and he looked all right. If he comes back out against Tennessee and has the exact same game that he had this week, are we as excited about that, or are we still concerned? But since he had such a bad game on Monday, we are just relieved that he wasn't bad and that, in fact, he was pretty damn good. So we're able to take this game and accept it for what it is, and we're more willing to take this game and accept it for what it is instead of wanting him to throw for 325 yards, 5 touchdowns. It's interesting how our expectations change, because I could see if the Browns were going into this game 2-0, that people might have expected that the Browns put up 40 and that putting up 27 might have been a disappointment. I know it sounds crazy, but don't act like you haven't seen Browns fans or fans in general of a football team be disappointed when they just kind of blow a team out instead of completely demolish their morals. Their morale, my bad. But that's the interesting thing with Deshaun Watson, because if we look at his stats and we look at what he's on pace to do right now, he's on pace on a 17-game pace to have a 64% completion percentage. He's on pace to throw for about 3,842 yards, 23 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and to take 68 sacks. Now, if we're going off the chart that I had before the season, well below expectations, well below the baseline expectations of Deshaun Watson, right? I thought at minimum you would get 4,267, 65%, 27 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. So I say this to say, not to make you bummed out about the Tennessee game or make you cool your jets on the Tennessee game, but I say this to say that while Tennessee was a big step, there are so many more steps to take for Deshaun Watson and his passing offense to get to where, one, they need to be, and two, where you want it to be. Right? Those are two different things. Where they need to be is he needs to be a 4,000+ yard passer. He needs to be a 27+ touchdown passer as well. Like, he needs to get to those numbers and he needs to get less sacks, right? Right now, he's already blown his sack budget to get to 45. He's at 13. He should be at 12 at this point in the season. He's taken too many sacks. He's going to have some exceptional games to get under that number. So while we can acknowledge that Deshaun has played a good game, and then we finally got to that step, right? Because the first step for any quarterback in any new situation, whether it be a college quarterback or coming to the pros or a quarterback being traded to a new team, the first hurdle, and this is a tough hurdle to get over, and I don't want to underestimate it. The first hurdle is to have a big enough game, right? To have a game where people go, whew, this might work, right? Like to calm the general nerves down. That helps for the player itself. I bet this game is good for Deshaun to make him trust everything that's going on, to make him feel right about what he's doing and where he's at right now. I think that having a big game is the first step, and it's an important step, but it is only one step. What I want to talk about are what are the next steps for Deshaun. What needs to happen for us to feel fully confident that the Cleveland Browns, in fact, got 100% of what they traded for. Because right now we're still not confident that we got that guy, but we feel a lot better given that we finally took the first step. If you wonder why you were frustrated through 8 weeks with Deshaun because he didn't have that game, it's because it took 8 weeks to take the first step. Now, sometimes that could take a while, and given the circumstances, it does make sense that it took a while. Like if were under normal circumstances and he was able to play week 1 last year, I'm sure instead of waiting 8 weeks, we would have waited 3 weeks like we did this year for the first big game. But since he had to come back in that weird situation, the suspension that he had for violating the league's conduct policy on sexual misconduct and all that, he had to come back, and it was weird and it was awkward and there was a lot of distractions, and he just didn't have a normal year. So we had to add 6 games to that. In some ways, you feel like it might have been better for the relationship that he would have with the city if he would have just got suspended the whole year last year. In retrospect, nobody was thinking that last year. Nobody wanted that to happen. But in retrospect, it might have been something that could have benefited everybody. But he didn't. He played those 6 games. Those 6 games are on our mind. And no matter if we know that there's context behind those 6 games or not, we're still going to process that as 6 games that were not up to expectation. And then 2 games that were, one game that was all right, and another game that was disappointing. And then, boom, we finally got the game that we wanted. So that's a great first step to take. And I think that got a lot of frustration out the way. And I think that let everybody breathe and calm the hell down. But now we need to talk about that second step that he takes. What makes him go from somebody who's on pace for 3,800 yards to 4,200 yards and possibly 4,700 yards? What takes him from a quarterback that's on pace for 23 touchdowns to 27 and possibly 38 touchdowns, right? What helps him make that jump? What does he need to make that jump? And what, quite frankly, does he need to do to make that jump? Now, one of the things I love that we saw last week was more big plays, right? Because that's been one of my consistent worries about this offense in the mixture of Deshaun and Kevin, is that I don't want this offense to feel like the same grind it was with Jacoby Brissett. And when I'm saying grind, I'm referring to how they have to get yards, right? It's nice to be able to do it, right? Because some drives you just need to get 5 here, 6 here, 7 here, 3 here, 5 here, 6 here, 7 here, maybe 10, maybe 12, maybe a 10-yard run, 5 here, 6 here, 7 here, 3rd down, score, touchdown. But that's been the general rhythm of the offense for a very long time. Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, even in the games he's playing well, that's been the general rhythm of the offense. What I enjoyed about that game and what I think encourages a lot of people about that game was that we were able to hit some big plays, some big chunk plays, right? There were the 2 touchdowns that count as chunk plays, and then there was the 2 fade balls that count as chunk plays. Now, where he takes that next step is if he can get those chunk plays in the middle. I want you to watch one player and one player only, and that'll tell you if Deshaun Watson's starting to take that next step. And that's if David Njoku's production starts to shoot up, right? Because that'll tell you everything you need to know about where he is. Because right now, David's production, if you've noticed, has really only come from design calls for him to get the ball. So tight end screens. It's really the only time David ever gets the ball. Maybe there's been a couple of times when David was like a check down, but in general, that's the only time that David gets the ball. And a lot of people have been wondering, where's David? Why aren't we using David? Well, the reason we're not using David right now is because Deshaun Watson needs to take a step in this offense in order to take advantage of what David Njoku does. What do I mean? I mean, Deshaun needs to be comfortable throwing with anticipation in the middle of the field so we can use David Njoku effectively. If in the next month or two, you start to see David Njoku's numbers shoot up, that tells you that Deshaun Watson is taking that next step. If in the next week or two, you see Donovan Peoples-Jones and Cedric Tillman's numbers jump up, that tells you he's taking that next step, because both of those players right now, given what their role is in the offense, are doing a lot of work in the middle of the field. The reason we haven't seen much DPJ is because DPJ works mainly in the middle of the field. The reason we haven't seen a lot of Cedric Tillman is because he's doing a lot of his work in the middle of the field. You can say the same thing with David Bell, even though David Bell works short to intermediate, so you see him more often. The reason you see a lot of Amari Cooper right now is because Coop wins his routes, 1, gets open, 2, gets separation, 3, and also on the sidelines. Well, not on the sidelines, but outside the numbers is where he does most of his work. Deshaun's very comfortable with the outside the number stuff. Where he's not comfortable is the stuff near the seams. Where he's not comfortable is deep, intermediate, middle of the field anticipation. We're not seeing certain players right now because he's not comfortable there. But if he gets comfortable there, those chunks are there to be had. You have players who could take advantage of those chunks, and then you're going to start seeing 40-yard shots, 50-yard shots, big chunk plays here. Teams are going to start to adjust, try to close the middle of the field. Then we're going to open up those fade balls that Deshaun does really well, and we're going to open up some of those sideline balls that he likes to throw. And then we're going to have the whole field available for us right now. What has been something that has slowed this offense down a little bit is that it's been obvious that Deshaun does not have that same comfort working in the middle of the field that he does outside the numbers. So he's more predictable with where he wants to go. But if Deshaun gets comfortable there, and there were signs this week that he was getting comfortable there. Now, again, the Titans just don't have the greatest coverage units in the world. They're going to allow Deshaun to get comfortable and have those outside, those outside shots, outside the numbers, a more disciplined unit, a more well-coached unit like the Baltimore Ravens are going to come in and be a lot more strict on that. And they're going to force him to win in the middle field. And that's why I think this week's game is a big test for him, because they're going to send a lot of people at him. But that's the key word. They're going to send a lot of people. So it's a big game for two parts of this team. One, the running backs. I don't know how many yards these guys are going to run for, but I think there's going to be opportunities to run the ball on the ground. If they're going to be sending a lot of people, there's a good chance that you can get to the second level if you're clever with your play call, or if you catch them in the wrong play call, you can be clever and get some yards there. But that's secondary to me. The most important thing this week is, how does Kareem Hunt do? How does Jerome Ford do, or Pierre Strong do as pass protectors?
Which team?
If they play well from a pass protecting standpoint, that will be huge for what the Browns want to do. I think that would be huge from the Browns offense. If they don't have a good game, then Kenny Hamilton's going to be in the backfield all day. Deshaun Watson's not going to have time to throw, and we're going to be frustrated again because he's going to be escaping the pocket super fast. For Deshaun Watson, what I think is super paramount for him is that he resists the urge to run out the pocket every chance he gets. Sometimes he's going to have to do it, right? If he clearly gets hit and he stays on his feet, he does one of those magician things where he just gets hit super hard and just doesn't move. Okay, yeah, run out the pocket, make a play, do what you got to do. But I want to see Deshaun stand in there, stand tall in the pocket, and make these throws downfield that I know are going to be open because of the amount of bodies that Baltimore has to send in order to get pressure because their front four is not effective. They're going to send Kyle Hamilton, which means the slot corners blitzing a lot. And when I say a lot, I don't think you understand. Kyle Hamilton might lead that team in pressures. That's how often he blitz from that slot corner position. They're going to send Kyle Hamilton. They're going to send Roquan Smith. They're going to send Pat Queen all game. That means they're sending their corner, their slot corner, they're sending their linebacker, and they're sending their other linebacker. What does that mean? Deep middle open. You got one-on-one with safeties in the middle of the field, but you're not going to have a ton of time to see it open. You're going to have to trust it. This is an opportunity for Deshaun to make progressions, to say that he's taking that next step, right? If he comes into this game, understands what's going to be there, and takes it and trusts that it's there, they're going to put up points. Elijah Moore is going to get behind this defense. So that's the step that we need Deshaun to take. That's how Deshaun gets to that next step. If you start to see David Njoku having big games, if you start to see Elijah Moore making big plays, if you start to see Cedric Tillman's name get called, all those guys are going to benefit from Deshaun having comfort in the middle of the field and throwing with anticipation in the middle of the field like he used to when he was more comfortable in Houston. If those guys start to go, you know that the progression has started and that Deshaun is well on his way to regaining 2020 form, and he can start making progress to now being better than he was in 2020. But that's what the next steps for Deshaun Watson look like. That's what you want progress to look like. If we end this season and David Njoku's yards are a disappointment and no tight end steps up, then we know where the problem was. He never took that step. He never found that comfort, because if he does, those yards should be there. David's a fine tight end. Jordan Akins is a fine tight end. It should be there. So that's what the next steps look like. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.